The most successful people take setbacks as opportunity. I have a lot of sayings, but one of my favorite sayings is sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. Focus on bringing the right people on board, have faith in your people, empower your people, encourage your people, give them the resources to be successful, and they will help you get to where you need to be.
Sales is not everyone's forte. I know some people actually dread it. But for successful growth, you need to make sure that you master certain skills, and selling is one of them. In today's episode, we discuss with my guest, Ryan, how to build winning teams and go-to-market strategies in a changing economic environment. Hello and welcome to this episode of Sales Therapy. I'm not your typical host, Alper, ex-salesperson turned co-founder, and this is your show, Sales Therapy, where we discuss past challenges in terms of selling and growth of today's leaders, how they learned from their experiences so they could continue their careers and flourish, and hopefully always end on a good note with a hint of vulnerability. All right, so in this episode, I'm very happy to be speaking with my friend Ryan Wilson. He is the VP of Revenue at Generis Global Partners, and they're an organizer of world-class B2B summits in both North America and Europe. Well, one thing I really like about Ryan is that he's absolutely very generous about his advice. We've had several chats about, challenges that we've been through in our lives, what we like as salespeople, and he aims to always create a stellar customer experience, and that's what he loves training his teams on as well. We'll talk about that today because Ryan has over 12 years of experience under his belt in B2B sales, mostly in startups and technology companies, and he has been advising startups on go-to-market strategies at his practice, the GTM playbook as well. Now, Ryan, welcome to Sales Therapy. How are you feeling today?
Thank you, Alper. Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Fantastic. Before we jump into business and solving problems and challenges, because this sales therapy, we like a little bit of, get to know you a little bit personally as well. A little bit of vulnerability always helps, or, things that you would like to share. But generally, this is a nice icebreaker to start with. Who is Ryan? Where did he grow up? What does he do outside of work?
Yeah, well, my name is Ryan Wilson, as you mentioned. I have been in sales for, as Alper mentioned, about 12 years now. I born and raised here in Toronto, in the Greater Toronto area. And in terms of myself and some of my passions, I'm an avid motorcyclist. I like to travel. Really enjoy kind of getting out there and participating in the arts and culture scene here in Toronto. And I think really what excited me about the opportunity to be a part of sales therapy was just what we're talking about here in terms of some of the challenges that people face as they grow their organizations. These are universal challenges. I think that everybody in a go-to-market function has to deal with, and I think the more that we can kind of share what we've been through and our unique experiences, the better we can help each other to rise above those challenges. Because a lot of these problems that we face as leaders within these organizations are not unique. Someone's always been there before. So, happy to come on and kind of talk about some of the things that I've learned in my experience, growing companies and taking them to the next level, scaling them up. And excited for the conversation today and how I can contribute.
I love that intro from your side because obviously you know your thing and you're not shy to share them with others. But also I would add to that, I think sharing the human aspect and psychological aspect of it is also important because we all go through, as a closer, we go through the stress of not being able to hit quota. As a builder, we lose sleep over certain things. So I think it's nice to make sure that, we're all in this together, but at the same time, we're not superhumans. So let's start with that, maybe from your past experience. As I said, this is not your first radio. You've grown from a closer role into a leader, and now I would say a builder because you're actually building your team up. You're doing a lot of structuring around it, how to share your wisdom with the rest of your team, etc. But you didn't always know everything. Oh, probably not either now.
Still don't.
Still working on it. So coming to this point, I'm sure you have had lots of challenges. Any stories that you would like to share about something where you felt really challenged or you persevered and thrived? It can be from any role in your career.
Yeah, well, I think challenges are part of the game, right? You mentioned I've kind of had a variety of experiences having gone from an individual contributor into a department leader to now kind of aligning multiple functions across a business. And what I've learned over that time is that tenacity is probably the number one trait that you need to possess in order to succeed in any go-to-market function. As an individual contributor, the challenges that you have are going to be based around pipeline. It's going to be based around how do I, connect with the correct decision makers? How do I build those relationships within these organizations to actually move the needle and be able to put an opportunity in Salesforce? By the time you're leading a department, your challenges are more around things like ramp time and ensuring that your reps have the right information at the right time in order to drive their opportunities forward. Your challenges start to become a little more focused on the broad nature of going and talking to customers and looking at how we might be able to improve the way that our salespeople engage or our marketing people engage with our customers or our customer success, folks engage with our customers. And it really becomes about enablement more than anything else. And enablement is something that I'm very passionate about. I think it can be transformative to any organization that really invests in it. But then by the time you're in my current role as a VP of Revenue, now it starts to become structural, and we start looking at how these different departments connect and collaborate. And we still have enablement as being kind of a core function of that, and ensuring that each team has the right resources and the know-how in order to be successful in their individual roles. But it's also now about connecting the dots and making sure that the left hand knows what the right hand's doing, and that you're breaking down silos to operate as one organization. So the challenges, I would say, are always unique, especially as you kind of move up within the organization and take on more responsibility. But I would say one of my favorite challenges is always kind of understanding the customer experience, right? And this is something that I've come to be really passionate about, because everything starts and ends with customers. And so whether you're an individual contributor and you're looking at how a customer is engaging with you from that first kind of cold call or cold email that you've sent, and understanding what made them convert to actually have that conversation with you, to get on a call and complete a discovery, I think that's something that is a challenge unto itself. And then as you kind of take on more responsibility, then it starts being, well, why do our most successful customers, why do they buy? What is it about our overall experience? What is it about how we deliver our product that really excites them?
Yeah, yeah. You already started talking about your current challenges there. Can you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about what is the role of the VP of Revenue? And you just joined the business fewer than 3 months ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I'm still new to Generis, but I'm no stranger to this business. Actually, I got my start with the co-founders about 12 years ago in a very similar business to this one. And I left that role to get into tech, and I spent the last decade working in technology and love that experience. Obviously, the tech world is, in many ways where it's at. But also, tech has its share of challenges. We went through, again, what I would call a bit of a contraction in 2023 with a lot of layoffs, and, funding availability became more restricted, capital crunch, if you will. So I think it just represented an opportunity for me to kind of take a step back and think about what I really enjoy doing, and that is working, in office with a team, helping to grow the business. And the opportunity to get in with the co-founders here at Generis was one that I couldn't pass up. These are former mentors of mine, amazing leaders in their own right. I learned a lot, back when I was an individual contributor in my first B2B sales role from these guys. So I have nothing but respect for them. And I also really respect what we do as a business in terms of connecting, these senior executives that come out as delegates to our events with solution providers, right? Who are oftentimes software companies or services providers or consultancies that are really trying to, be more effective in their business development efforts. So in my current role as a VP of Revenue, I'm really responsible for aligning functions, really focused on execution. So what that means is, while there's certainly a large part of my role which is based in strategy and ensuring that we have the right people and systems and processes in place in order to be able to grow the business, because we just opened up an office in Berlin. We're going to be expanding, that presence as well. There's also definitely a tactical element to it, ensuring that we are successful, with each individual customer. We understand what their success criteria are, so that we can build long-standing relationships and continue to grow those accounts over time. Because we do work with some of the biggest names in the world. Fortune 50 companies are our customers. And so, that represents a unique opportunity to, get in a little deeper with those folks and build those relationships that stand the test of time.
Especially early days, you have a little bit, quote unquote, the luxury of getting to know them before you're being kind of chased by numbers, etc.
Exactly.
Speaking of numbers, I'm thinking you
Yeah.
mentioned the scrutiny. I would say that I'm a very frugal founder myself, and I see a lot more people coming into, unfortunately, my side of being very conscious about their spend. Does that
Yeah.
somehow affect your industry? Like, are deals now taking longer to close, more difficult to close, more stakeholders? Any of those becoming your reality in your day to day?
Yeah. I would say that no industry is immune
Yeah.
from what's happening in the broader macroeconomic environment. We're no different. I think that the way that we try and position it with our customers, though, is that fundamentally you have to spend money to make money in every industry, right? And what we do as a business is about connecting the dots, right? Bringing people together so that you can accelerate your business development and sales efforts. So while we certainly encounter those same budgetary restrictions with our customers, especially on the solution provider side, where they're saying, hey, it's I'm not sure if I can get the budget to be able to come out and invest, tens of thousands of dollars to come to one of these summits or events. Fundamentally, it's about understanding their go-to-market strategy. It's about understanding how they're trying to grow their business in, FY24, and about helping them to understand how making those connections on site, seeing people face to face, is going to be effective in helping them to reach their top line goals, right? So certainly we're not immune, but I think that there's definitely a way that we frame it, which helps people to see the value. And just like any other type of sales, I don't care whether you're selling cars or you're selling software or you're selling B2B events, it's about what's in it for me as the customer. And
Yeah.
if you can connect the dots for them, if you can show them how you're getting them from, A, which is where they're at today, where they're experiencing a lot of pain, whatever that pain is, to B, which is, that ideal state where they're going to reach their goals, they're going to be effective, and they're going to look like superstars for their boss, and then showing how your product or service is the vehicle to get you from A to B. I mean, it's the same sales process no matter what you're selling.
Yeah, I think events is actually sometimes a little bit overlooked in certain industries. I used to be in, training sales or HR tech, or property technology. There were certain events where you definitely had to be because they were kind of no-brainers.
Mm-hmm.
I guess now being in the business, your mindset to events might have changed, but somebody approaching events with a bit of a caution in terms of should I be spending this money now on this, etc., etc. Like, what are the key benefits they get from it? Like, I already have in my mind one or two that comes to mind. Either you're upstart and you're looking for awareness, or you're actually among 1,000 high intent prospects where you can actually reach them and start a connection with them because your sales cycle is long. There's so many benefits. So how do you change people's perception of if they need your product or not?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I would say, again, it starts from understanding what are their goals, right? It doesn't, what's the saying? Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care, right? So I like to start every conversation with my customers around, what is it that you're trying to accomplish in the next 12 months? What are the overall goals of the business, right? Because my responsibility as a salesperson, first and foremost, is to help my customers win, right? So if I don't understand what you care about, how am I supposed to cater my offering towards you? So step one is understanding what is your strategy, what are your goals, how would you know if you were successful 12 months from now in achieving those goals? Once we understand what their goals are, then it's about ensuring that we're connecting them with the right audience. So, the value that we offer as a company is that we have a very focused group of attendees at our business summits. So everybody that comes out to our summits is director level or above. So these are very senior decision makers, very senior executives from household names, companies like, Kraft Heinz, Boeing, Kimberly Clark, very, very well recognized and known organizations. I was just at our American Automotive Summit this past week in Detroit. We had folks from GM, Ford, Stellantis on site, Volvo. And I think when you are let's use software as an example, right? Because we both come from a software background. I imagine probably a lot of people who are going to be watching this are in software and technology. Uh, the hardest part of selling in today's modern environment, if you're a software company, is that your prospects are being inundated with communication and correspondence from all the different sales tools out there, like Outreach, like SalesLoft. They're just getting bombarded with emails, right? They're getting bombarded with cold calls. So how do you cut through all of that noise, right? Well, the goal, I think, for every salesperson is to get in front of these prospects and to have some face time with them. And look, having some time virtually to connect with people is great, but nothing beats face to face, right? Nothing beats actually going out to a customer site and being able to have that face time with them, being able to, sit down and be across a table from someone and just get to know them and have that rapport and see the micro expressions and, understand the broader team and see their site, see their facility. So while we can't bring you as a vendor or a solution provider to their actual site, we can put you in a room with these people and then give you an opportunity to have 10 of these, one-to-one conversations with all of your target prospects in a very accelerated timetable. So after 2 days, you've got 10 new opportunities that you can follow up on with decision makers who you've had a very clear conversation around their challenges, their objectives, and how we're going to be able to add value as a solution provider to your business in the next 12 months. And it's just really connecting with buyers that are already in the consideration phase of their buyer's journey. These are people who are not only pain or problem aware, but they're also solution aware. And now they're in that stage of trying to find the right vendor or solution provider to work with. When you can cut your sales cycle in half, that obviously has tremendous value from a pipeline perspective. And that's what we do as a business. And that's why I was excited to get back into it, because there are a lot of customers that we work with day in, day out who have really seen tremendous value, multiple thousands of percentages worth of ROI from attending our summits. And I think when we think about, especially in the technology space, the value of getting face-to-face with customers, nothing will ever beat face-to-face interactions. I don't care how good you are at doing Zoom calls, face-to-face is the best.
Well, you clearly know your customer and what they're expecting. You have that customer centricity. You're able to empathize and put yourself in their shoes. But how do you bring other people to your team who will have that kind of skill or vision? And how do you train them? Like, how do you approach that?
Well, I think when we're thinking about recruitment and about bringing the right people into the team, it starts with understanding what is your ideal, just like we have an ideal customer profile. I always start with what's our ideal candidate profile? What are the traits? What are the behaviors? What are the skills that we need for someone to be successful in this role? So when I'm working with our recruitment team, it's about understanding who are our most successful people that we have in the organization. What do we see as being attributes for those individuals? And how can we ensure that we're looking for those attributes in our talent pipeline? And then once we have those people in for an interview, it's like any other sales process, right? Like you got to sell the dream, sell the vision, help them understand what it is that we're working towards, because fundamentally we're always selling, right? Especially during recruitment, because if we can't position the value that we bring for our customers, if we're not excited about the opportunity and the career prospects and the value that we're going to be able to bring to this individual, why should they be excited? So really understanding what the vision is for the organization, how you intend to grow the business, being able to articulate how this individual is going to be a key component in that transformation, I think is what really excites candidates and what makes them want to be a part of that journey.
And I would imagine that, for you to be selling something where you need to build relations and there's an awareness phase, etc., they have to have a certain skill set around, maybe being like an advisor, because it's not really high velocity, like 2 emails and, we close a low ticket deal, etc. So do you have your 3 or 4 skills that you absolutely must have in a certain candidate? Like, for example, for me, I always tell anybody knows me knows that I like the biggest deal breaker for me is ownership. A sense of ownership for me is, and I have my own ways to try and test it. Like, do you have your own, this
Sure.
person has this or that?
Yeah, ownership is important, right? Like you have to be accountable and take ownership of your outcomes, right? So I would agree with you on that one, 1,000%, Alper. I am looking for people who take ownership of their lives, who take ownership of, how they're going to pursue their career objectives. I would say, and people have asked me this question before, so I'm going to come back to the same answer that I've given before. There's really 3 attributes that I look for in high performers, regardless of function, but definitely for salespeople, right? The first one is being a self-starter, right? I want people who, again, going back to this concept of ownership, who are going to go and do the thing without being told to do the thing, right? And that applies if you're in marketing, that applies if you're in CS, that applies if you're in any function within the business, production, operations, doesn't matter. You got to be willing to, start doing the work without being told to do it, right? That's really important. I want a self-starter. The second thing that I look for is coachability. I think that every single person, regardless of how good you are in your role, you're going to have setbacks. You're going to have challenges, right? And you're not going to do everything at 100% out of the gate. Uh, so being willing to accept feedback, being willing to implement feedback, those are very important to me. I try and, tell everybody on my team that feedback is a gift, right? Whether it's coming from our customers, whether it's coming from our loved ones, whether it's coming from our managers, when people give you feedback, so long as it's constructive, they
Yeah.
want to help you,
It's just a shortcut.
right? But
Take and apply, basically.
exactly, but the folks who don't take that feedback, those are the ones who struggle. And then they wonder why they're struggling. Well, it's because you're not taking it, you're not implementing it, right? I seek feedback all the time. I talk to our CEO, I talk to our COO, I talk to my team members, I talk to my managers, and I believe feedback is a two-way street. I ask them, what do you think I'm doing well? What do you think I can work on? Doesn't always mean when you're taking feedback, from folks that report to you that you're going to implement 100% of that feedback, right? But at least understanding people's perceptions
Yeah.
is valuable,
Yeah.
right? Even if you don't necessarily agree with it or you don't think that it's well founded, you got to know the perceptions. And so coachability, I think, is important. And then the third one is like grit,
Mm.
tenacity, right? Just this, especially in sales, you're going to encounter, like I said, setbacks. You're going to encounter challenges. Not everybody's going to be a buyer, but the most successful people take opportunities, take setbacks as opportunities, right? It's this, I have a lot of sayings, but one of my favorite sayings is sometimes you win and sometimes you learn,
Yeah. Oh wow.
right? And so if you encounter a no, do a little bit of an after action analysis on that. Try and figure out why it was a no. Where did we lose that opportunity? Where did we go wrong? And I think if you understand that, you're going to be that much more prepared for the next opportunity that comes down the pipeline because you're going to be preempting that no or understanding what could cause you to go in that direction. So, yeah, I would say just to summarize, like I said, being a self-starter, taking initiative, coachability, and grit are probably the three attributes that are most important to me.
I think I really learned from my co-founder Adam. He's really good at. He's a product guy, and he takes feedback as data. It's just that. Oh well,
Mm,
okay, this didn't get the reaction we want. It's just data. Let's learn and move on. I don't think it's very
yep.
easy when you're in sales, especially when you're junior and you're handling rejection. So maybe before you learn, take a day of grief or have a drink or meditate, whatever it takes you out of that mind state. But then afterwards, learn from it. And I remember,
Yeah.
very early in my sales career, my manager, he was the founder, and he came into the room one day and he said, "You know what? I have some news for you. You won't like it." Apparently, I had pissed off a client very, very
Mm.
aptly while I was thinking,
Who hasn't at least once?
who hasn't? And we'll talk about that too. And then he said, "You won't like this, but take it as a learning. I know you will feel like
Yep.
terrible today, but tomorrow is another day." And it was just so sweet of him.
Exactly.
We learn from those. Do you have any of those? Like, actually, I wanted to ask you a real life experience of this. Like, it's all good. We have the skills we want in the people we
Yeah.
bring in, etc. But what happens when the people that we bring in, somehow there's misalignment between the two parties? Like, how do you handle that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's going back and resetting expectations, right?
Mm,
I think it's really important when you're interviewing people to set expectations of what the role is, what some of the challenges are in the role, and make sure that they're going into it with open eyes, right? I don't think you should oversell
mm,
positions. I think that you should really be careful to, tell them about the opportunities and hype it up as best you can, but don't oversell it. Also let them know about some of the challenges and make sure that they're going into it expecting that it's not going to be, a bed of roses. There are going to be some thorns and they got to be willing to work through that, right? But if we have an individual that's joined the team and there are performance issues or perhaps they're not really grasping the fundamentals. I'm going to sit down with that person. I'm going to ensure that, I understand from their perspective why they feel like they're not performing. And then I'm going to go back and we're going to reset expectations around what the role is and what we need from that person. I'm not a big fan of traditional performance management methods, but they do have a place in every organization. Nobody likes to put people on performance improvement plans, but fundamentally, if they're being done with the right intentions, which is to get the person back on track first and foremost. I'm not a big fan of using performance improvement plans to get people out. I think performance improvement plans should be based around achievable objectives, achievable metrics that are going to help people to get back on track in their role. I think as leaders, too often we look at our people as being interchangeable and saying, oh, well, this person didn't work out. Let's just get rid of them and we'll hire someone new. Well, people are still people at the end of the day. And if you hired that person, you hired them for a reason. There was obviously something redeeming that you saw in that person. So you got to at least make an effort to try and help them to get back on track. And then look, if the performance is not there, it is what it is. You have to make a business decision. But the two things that I don't negotiate are attitude and effort, right? If you have a bad attitude or you're not putting in the effort, there's no room for that. But if you have the right attitude, you have the right effort, I'm going to make every effort that I can to help you to get back on track because obviously you're a good culture fit.
Yeah.
And so there's obviously something
Also,
that's happening behind the scenes. Yeah, there's something happening behind the scenes. It could be a personal issue. It could be, that their dog died. It could be that they got a family member that's sick. It could be that they broke up with their partner. It could be a million different things. We still have to be human beings at the end of the day and be sensitive to that and try and help our people wherever we can.
do you think those attitudes towards, let's say being a little bit more understanding versus like cutthroat, hard culture, you either perform or not. Do you think culture or geography has a share in that, like shaping that culture? Like to be very specific, like for example, we're in the UK, we're based in the UK, but our team is a global team, and everybody comes with different
Yeah.
attitudes. At the end of the day, we try to share the same values as you aptly called, like around performance, motivation, etc. But different people pursue different things in different ways, and Canadians are notoriously known for being nice and kind and etc. Versus in the US, sometimes the culture is a bit more cutthroat. You either make it or you're out. Um, do you feel like there's a role of culture and geography in those decisions?
Believe me, we have those types of companies here in Canada too. Not
Mm.
everything is sunshine and rainbows north of the border. And I actually think that's a bit of a misconception about Canadians. We have this reputation as being very like kind and polite. Canadians are not really kind, but they are polite,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we know how to say things in a way that is not
Sounds
super
pretty to me.
direct, but it's cold up here, man, and that tends to freeze people's hearts to a
Okay.
certain extent, right? So there's certainly no shortage of organizations here that have a cutthroat attitude. But look, I would say that cultural differences are certainly a factor. I would say it's up to us as leaders if we want to build a culture and engage in cultural direction setting, we have to practice what we preach, right? We really have to embody it. It starts at the top. If the CEO of the company is not embodying those values, then how is anybody else supposed to, right? The VPs can't change the culture if the CEO is not on board. You know what I'm saying? So really, I think it's incumbent upon the C-suite, it's incumbent upon the executive leadership to set the tone for what is and is not acceptable in the organization. And when it comes to things like performance management, look, we're in business to make money. Of course, we're in sales to make money. Obviously, salespeople especially are coin operated, which is great. You should be. You should be money motivated. But at the same time, like real life happens, and there's a saying that my parents imbued in me, which is, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. So if we can't be cognizant of that, if we're going to have the type of culture within our organization where you miss one quarter and then you're out, you're going to lose really quality talent that way, right? So I've always thought about thinking about relationships on the aggregate, thinking about the contributions of individuals. Obviously, you have to have performance management, as I've said, as part of the structure. But you got to work with people, especially if they've contributed in a big way in the past. Like you got to give people a little bit of leeway when there are significant challenges in their own life, because when you show a little bit of compassion to your people, and I've had this happen, like I've had team members that have, had a family member that passed away unexpectedly. I've had team members that went through a really rough breakup with someone that they've been with for, 5+ years. I've had team members that had a sick parent and that needed to take some time off work. When those scenarios come up, they're watching to see how you respond to that. And not only is that individual watching to see how you respond to it, the rest of the team is too. And if you lead with compassion, if you lead with empathy, people people will love you for it. They'll give you back that love and support and their energy and their commitment in spades, right? And so I would rather, make an error 1 out of 10 times in giving someone, a little bit of a longer leash or a little bit more compassion that maybe didn't deserve it, and have the other 9 people be really grateful for me and sing my praises and want to work for me for the long term, then just cut everyone loose and then lose out on a lot of quality people that otherwise could have done big things for my team. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're going to be going out there and looking for those people again anyway. Yeah, unfortunately, when the
Exactly.
economy and outside factors kind of push you into that box of being very cutthroat and like either you're in or out, I think we lose sight of that. So I think it's a good reminder. To wrap up the section, you mentioned that very much top of mind for you is building that playbook and creating that enablement
Yes.
structure. I think we've talked about a lot of psychological and motivational enablement. How about the tools and strategies that you implement to create that concept of enablement in-house? And I know that you're very keen on, diagnosing different buyer enablement tools, etc., which are quite effective for your line of business too. What would be your
Yeah. And Flowla's
recommendation?
obviously got some pretty cool tools for buyer enablement and sales enablement more broadly. So a little plug there for you guys. If you're a first-time sales leader or you're even an experienced sales leader and you're trying to figure out how to move the needle for your team, or you're a marketing leader or CS leader, ultimately you have to get a couple of things right.
Hmm.
The first one is that you have to have every single process documented, right? If there is a correct way of doing something in the business, and there always is, there needs to be a flow chart for it. There needs to be a process document that sits alongside the flow chart, which goes into more details about each of the process steps. It needs to be very clear who's doing what, especially when processes intersect across departments. If you don't have a flow chart for every process in the business, you got to start right away and get that documented. There's great tools like Lucidchart and Miro that make this a breeze, but somebody's got to take ownership of that in your team. Because if you don't have that, how do you know when things are done correctly? And how do you diagnose problems in your workflows if you don't understand what the process is, what the workflow is? So step one, process documentation. Step two, creating central repositories for each of the different teams. So in my previous role, we built out a knowledge base using a tool called stonely.com for the sales team. This was like a centralized hub where the entire sales organization was able to go and find scripts. They were able to find talk tracks around different elements of our platform. They were able to find, comparison sheets, battle cards, as other organizations would call them, that were customer facing, that they could then send out to customers to clearly articulate how our solution differed from some of the other players out there in the market. We had, all sorts of testimonials and reference examples where we could bring customers to a website that was using our software to show them how that software was integrated. We had all kinds of information in there about as well how our team would interact with other departments and what the steps were, when a customer signed up. How are they going to move through the onboarding phase? What are the service levels for each of the teams in onboarding and support? The more information that you give to your salespeople and the better you organize it, especially when it comes to things like handling common objections and what the pre-approved rebuttals are for those. If you don't have a central repository for all of these things, your team is flying blind, right? They're essentially trying to fly the plane without an owner's manual, right? Without any instrumentation. So you have to get the organization piece right and create that centralized repository for this information. It doesn't have to be with Stonely. You can do it on G Drive, right? Or any other type of internal drive, but there's got to be a place where people can go and find what it is that they're looking for in order to do their job more effectively. And then I would say the third piece is having very strong reporting, right? So I think most VPs, CROs are aware of the importance of having good reporting. It goes without saying. Our process and our roles are very data driven, but I don't think that frontline managers appreciate it enough. about the importance of data, about the importance of availability of data, about having those reports and dashboards set up, whether you're using Salesforce or HubSpot or any other CRM. If you don't have data, again, you're flying the plane without instrumentation. You don't really understand where your team is doing the right things, where they're putting in the right inputs, and where they're missing steps in the process that can be transformative to outcomes. So I would say that those are kind of the three elements that are really important from an enablement perspective, both buyer and sales enablement.
I think data is very important and everybody's talking about it. But when I think about almost forcing reps to enter data, which kind of, doesn't flow very naturally with people, like how do you make it
Yeah.
something that is easy to do, but also at the same time shows value? Like you have to show the value. What's in it for them? It's good for the leader. They're gonna do
Yeah.
you are doing as a rep. But what's in it for me? That's. Do you have any tactics to make sure that the whole team
Yeah.
is on those objectives?
That's the biggest challenge, right? I mean, what's the saying? Salesforce is not really built for reps. It's built for managers. It's built for VPs and CROs to know what's going on in the pipeline. Look, that's always going to be a challenge, right? I don't know any account executive or frontline salesperson who's like, oh man, I love going into Salesforce and updating my deals and updating my close dates and adding contact roles and all that kind of stuff. So I think if you want to get people to use these CRMs effectively, like you said, you got to explain what's in it for them. You got to show them how it's accelerating their deals. You got to show them how it's giving you valuable insights as a manager to help them, right? You also have to show them. You also have to show them a way to do it without too much friction, right? You got to be there to really coach them
Natural.
to understand the process, right? Like especially using Salesforce, like okay, you set up a lead, and then after you set up a lead, when you convert it, well, don't worry, it's going to create an account, it's going to create a contact, it's going to create an opportunity, it's going to save you 3 steps, right? Because if I'm a sales rep who's never used Salesforce before, maybe I think that I have to create an account, create a contact, create an opportunity manually, whereas if I just started with a lead, I can create all three immediately when I convert it. Oh, okay, now it doesn't seem so arduous. It doesn't seem so onerous for me to get in and start using Salesforce as long as I understand the order of operations and how to do it correctly, right? And then the other piece I think is as leaders, especially if you've got a Salesforce admin, you have to be looking at how do I make this process simple, right? Like what steps can I remove? How can I boil this down to the minimum requirements of inputs so that it's not so difficult for my salespeople to give me the data that I want because I'm not asking them for 1,800 different things, right? The opportunity record, the contact record, the account record, they should be as simple to fill out as possible and only give you the data that you actually require, right?
So
And then once you've done that, you're reducing the workload for your reps, which means they're more likely to give you what you want. But I always think of my role as being I am responsible for helping my team to get value out of this, which means I need to help them to do their jobs effectively and not give them a bunch of busy work. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah. So you do your job as a leader first, and then expect people to do their job, like make their jobs easier in the first place. Excellent. Well, this was a great chat. So
Exactly.
moving on to the final section of the conversation, this is
Yeah.
where we go into three rapid fire questions. So I'm going to ask you
Shoot.
three recommendations, very specific, and I'm going to ask you to be under a minute or two max on those. So these will be as a leader, as a closer, and as a Canadian. Okay? Ready?
Sure.
Excellent.
Go.
So, first one, as a leader, what pieces of recommendation would you have for someone who is just starting a VP of revenue role, maybe their first time being in that leadership position? Like, how should they plan their next 6 months? What should they be conscious of?
Yeah. So if it's your first time in a VP role, you got to remember that the first team that you are responsible and accountable to is your executive leadership, right? The C-suite, the board of directors. Those are the first team. You have to get really dialed in on their objectives in order to understand how you're going to execute on their strategy. Because at the end of the day, in my role, I'm not the one who sets the entire strategy, right? I have some ideas about things that we can do to execute on the strategy of the business, but I'm not the one that's kind of charting the course. That's the responsibility of the CEO and the COO. So remember that you are accountable to your first team, and everything that you do has to be in lockstep with your C-suite. Beyond that, remember that your people are your greatest asset. It is your responsibility to ensure that you have the right people on the bus to help you to get to the destination, right? Focus on bringing the right people on board, have faith in your people, empower your people, encourage your people, give them the resources to be successful, and they will help you get to where you need to be.
Next question as a closer. So, what challenges did you face and overcome as a closer? What advice would you give to your team who closes complex deals?
So always start with what's in it for them. I would say that's the most important thing to understand. When you're working complex deals, you need to understand the goals, objectives, responsibilities of every stakeholder. If you're working on an enterprise deal, there's a lot of people who have a stake in the outcome of this project. So understanding what operations cares about, understanding what the compliance team cares about, understanding what the sales team cares about, the marketing team, anybody who has a dog in that fight. Anybody who cares about the outcome of that project, you have to understand what their priorities are and how this project is going to affect them, what their success criteria are going to be on the project. Never rely on one individual champion to get the deal done for you. I would say one of the biggest challenges that I had when I was first making the transition in enterprise sales was I would rely too much on one person to help me navigate the organization and help me to get the understanding of what their peers cared about. What I changed in my process that helped me to be far more effective was I started asking who gets involved in the decision. Who are the players, right? And then I would get their contact information and I'd reach out to them directly, introduce myself, say, I'm working with John and your operations team. He mentioned that you'd be involved in this project. I wanted to reach out to you personally and understand what's going on in your world and how, if we are going to work together, how can I make sure that you're hugely successful? And that was absolutely transformative in working on the large enterprise opportunities.
Fantastic. So the A in band authority and MEDPIC criteria still hold to this day. And something to add from my side is one of the 5 reasons why winnable deals don't close is a lack of multi-threading. And 3 months down the line, somebody pops out of nowhere and your deal slips. So don't let that happen. Don't be that person. And the final question is, as a Canadian, we alluded to this briefly, but I will say, how do you think the sales process should be adapted in different regions for success, especially now you're looking for a global expansion, entering into different geographies, etc. Is the working culture different in all those regions that you face? And how are you planning to preempt some cultural issues, or how will you adapt to those cultural differences?
Yeah. So I think sales processes fundamentally should follow a similar structure regardless of where you are in the world. They're called best practices for a reason, right? So understanding who the stakeholders are, understanding the buying criteria or decision criteria, understanding the success criteria with deployment, understanding the cost structure and how it affects your customer. All of these things are going to be consistent regardless of where you are in the world. But I think there is absolutely a difference in how buyers behave depending on what region of the world that you're selling into. If anybody tells you that Canadians and Americans buy the same, they're wrong, right? That's just not true. Same thing with how folks in the UK buy, or folks in the APAC region buy, or folks in the Middle East. Buyers and buyer behavior is always going to be different. Thinking about the Canadian and American example, when I think about selling into the US, there usually does tend to be one decision maker who can actually get the deal done for you as the final, let's say, signing authority in the US. And if you get to that decision maker, you can absolutely accelerate your deals 100%. In Canada, it tends to be more of decision by committee, right? So understanding that nuance is very important when you're selling into different markets because you want to understand how deals are typically done. Now, is that to say that 100% of Canadian companies don't have a command and control structure where the CEO makes all the calls? No, absolutely not. But if you understand what the overarching tendency is in terms of decision-making process in that region, you will be far ahead of your peers who are treating every opportunity, especially if they're calling into multiple countries, the exact same way, right? So understand the buying culture, understand the decision-making process in your region, and you'll be light years ahead of your competition.
The key is empathy and being buyer centric again. Like we go back to it. It's about them, it's
Yep,
not about you. Wonderful. So thank you very much
yep.
for that, Ryan. Now, as any good therapist, I have to cut us on the clock because we are just on time. If people want to find you, where's the best place for them to reach out? LinkedIn or somewhere else? What should they do?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Ryan Will, RyanWil. And yeah, happy to connect, happy to talk shop about anything sales, revenue, marketing, growth. Really passionate about that stuff. And always looking to expand my network.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ryan. Now, that's a wrap on this episode of Sales Therapy. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to us on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platform. I'm your host, Alper Yurder, and thank you for listening. Bye bye.
Thanks, Alper.